Majosi, the author of Lessons from Past Heroes. This is the Phumlani Majosi show where we give you common sense on political and economic affairs. Remember, I'm on X at Phumlani M. Majosi. I'm on Facebook. Phumlani M. Majosi, that's my Facebook page. I'm also on LinkedIn, Phumlani M. Majosi. I'm also on Instagram at Phumlani M. Majosi. And I'm also on TikTok at Phumlani M. Majosi as well. You can get me there to engage on South Africa's political and economic affairs, as well as world affairs as well. Dawie Roodt is back, one of South Africa's outspoken economists. He is back with me. We had a great conversation last time about the GNU and the economy. That was very a nice conversation, and I saw many people learned a lot as well. So today, he and I are talking about Donald Trump's tariffs. What will be the impact on the global economy? Are the tariffs going to cause a seismic shift? Should we be concerned? Are we going to see the US inflation rising? Dawie, how are you, sir? Are you good?
I am fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for asking me. It's just amazing talking to you. So thank you very much for the invite. I'm doing excellent, and I can see you are in good spirits as well.
You see, how nice is that? That we all feel great. Tell me, Dawie, you've been watching the world affairs. You're an economist, right? And you do a lot of investment. We have to invest in other countries. We have to invest in South Africa as well. We have to watch the macro, global macro, affairs. We have Donald Trump. He's back in the White House. He has his economic agenda. The first question I want us to discuss what he has said in the past. Is it the past 24 hours now? Where he is saying, he posted on his Truth Social. He is saying South Africa is confiscating land and treating certain classes of people very badly. It is a bad situation that the radical left media doesn't want to so much as mentioned. A massive human rights violation, at a minimum, is happening for all to see. The US won't stand for it. We will act. Also, I will be cutting off all future funding to South Africa until a full investigation of this situation has been completed. What do you make of this, Dawie?
Yeah,
How
yeah.
do we react to this? Should we be worried as citizens?
I think
What's going
so.
on here?
I think we should be worried. Well, I think perhaps a good starting point must be that we have to understand something here, and that is Donald Trump is the most powerful man in the world. Donald Trump is the president of the biggest economy in the world. Donald Trump represents the country in the world that gives the most international aid in the world. Donald Trump's got the biggest army that he commands. Donald Trump's got the most amazing technology behind him. Now, whether you like this guy or not, he is very, very powerful. And don't think for one moment, if you're going to negotiate with Donald Trump, that it's a negotiation between equals. It's not. Donald Trump is the big guy here. He's the top dog, and we simply have to understand this. Now, I must tell you, listening to that comment that you just, the quote of Donald Trump, clearly Donald Trump doesn't understand the subtleties. He doesn't understand the whole of the South African history. He doesn't understand many things in South Africa. And I think he will be very informed. And hopefully, before he make very harsh decisions about South Africa, he will think very hard about that before he really takes steps against South Africa. I also believe that he has been influenced. Now, I have to be very careful on what I'm going to say, but I guess he has been influenced by South Africans or previous South Africans like Musk, for example. And we also have to understand that Donald Trump, he comes from a certain ideological background, and he believes ideologically in certain things. Having said all of that, maybe I can just make a personal comment about my own personal stance about expropriation and private property rights. I believe that the primary function of the state, function number one of the state, is to look after me and to look after my stuff. The job of the state is to look after the people of the country and to protect their stuff. The state cannot steal my property. Of course, there are some instances where you can excuse the state from taking some property from me. Taxes is a good example. Somebody must fund the state, but the state's got the responsibility to use those taxes to protect me and to protect my stuff. But when it comes to the state that just taking stuff willy-nilly, and I must tell you that the ideological beliefs of the ANC, and of course there are limitations, they can't just do whatever they want to, but ideologically the ANC is a government or is a political party that believes in socialism, believes in that the private individual should not own stuff. And so ideologically, the ANC clearly is somewhere where they want to expropriate people's assets. I don't think it's going to happen overnight in South Africa. I don't think they're going to steal all assets in South Africa, but without a doubt, the most recent legislation puts them in a much stronger position where they can take assets from South Africans. And I
You see,
feel very
David,
uncomfortable about that.
yeah. You see, David, that's my concern here. I'm on the side of the people who see this expropriation act as something that is not good, right? Because it
Not
opens the
good.
door, David. It opens the door to politicians expropriating without compensation. And guess what? We
Of
have
course.
seen we have seen, David, over the past years, over the past decade now, the atmosphere, the political rhetoric, right, from politicians who are calling for we need to get our land back. White people are in ownership of the land. We are poor because they took our land. This constitution is stopping us from getting our land back. We have seen in some instances, there have been instances where people are grabbing land, taking land illegally, enacting shacks. We have seen that, right? We do know that in our parliament, Davi, we have seats that are held by political parties from the EFF to the MK party and others who are advocating for, and the ANC, by the way, who are advocating for the land to be taken away or to use the laws to,
But
to take the land without compensation. So
no,
how
no,
can,
no, no, of
how can
course,
we
I
not be
don't.
worried?
No, I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
Just a few things that are important. First of all, I think Donald Trump is not fully informed. It's
Mm.
not as if the ANC is going to steal everything tomorrow morning.
Of course. Yeah. No,
Certainly,
yeah. Mm.
yeah. That's the first thing. The second thing is as always, there's some racial undertones here, and
Exactly. Yes.
he's hitting that drum as well. And there could be some truth in it. Okay, but I think talking about land and talking about the expropriation, there are two things that I think that are crucially important. Firstly, land is becoming less and less important in the modern economy. Because modern economies does not function on land only. Modern economy does not consist of agriculture and mining anymore. Modern economy runs somewhere else. Modern economy is in the service industry. Modern economy is about technology. Modern economy is about the cloud in economy and stuff like that. If you're going to take all the land in South Africa and you give it to politicians to run, we're going to be a poor country, but the economy is not going to stop because people with the necessary skills will still operate in the modern economy because they will do their business in the cloud. That's where the
Mm.
modern economy is. And
Mm.
that's the first point I want to make, is that they do not understand that it is not about land, it is about what you do with the land that matters. And the second point is, what is crucially important is that the modern economy does not depend on land. The modern economy is somewhere in the cloud. And for that, you need something very importantly, and that is human capital, and that is skills. And
Mm.
unfortunately, our education system in South Africa is a horrible education system or skills development system. We do not prepare our people for the modern economy. So forget about land. Put the emphasis where it matters, and that's on skills development.
Skills development. I could not agree with you more. Even
Mm.
economist Thomas Sowell. You do know Thomas Sowell, right?
Of course,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course. What an amazing guy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm an amazing economist. Now,
Yeah.
Thomas Sowell has argued the same thing you argue, Davi, and that is the key is skills. If you do
Mm.
have the skills that are in demand in the market, right? That people are willing to pay for, the skills that are relevant to modern economy, to modern economies, technology, and so on and so on
Yeah.
and so on. So it's not really, as you say, I totally, I'm with you. It doesn't, the land obsession, I think it's misguided, and
Of course it is.
it's
Very
politicians
much.
trying to manipulate people, right? Manipulate people.
But you know what I'm so sometimes I laugh at our political leadership.
Mm.
No, I haven't heard that. Somebody told me he said so. Maybe you can confirm whether he said so or not. But apparently, Gwede Mantashe said that South Africa is going to hold back our crucial minerals and not export it to the United States. Now, can
I
you
heard that,
imagine?
yeah.
Did he actually say that? Well, all you need to do if you want to withhold South Africa's crucial exports to the rest of the world, just put the ANC in charge because they're going to destroy Transnet, they're going to destroy Eskom. Sorry, put Gwede Mantashe in charge of mining in South Africa because he will not approve mining licenses. He will not approve all these exploration licenses. The reason why we're not exporting in South Africa or nearly exporting enough is exactly because of Gwede Mantashe. So just put him in
Mm.
charge and we're not going to export anything else. But I think it's quite arrogant for him to threaten the Americans and tell them we're going to withhold some of these crucial elements and not export it to the United States.
Now, I want us to close off on this so that we can move on to Trump's tariffs, right? Um, there is this thing of AGOA as well, Dawie.
Yeah.
And it's my understanding is that it's due to be renewed sometime later this year. Are we at risk here?
Yes,
Could we
very much.
found ourselves? Because this Trump 2.0, Dawie, doesn't seem to be, playing games. Could we lose
Okay,
our
no, no,
number two
come on,
player?
let's just see how Trump can affect the South African economy. He can simply by opening his mouth, he can have an impact on the South African economy. In fact, that has already happened. By threatening South Africa, the rand took a knock over the weekend. That's one example.
Mm,
Another one is that you can simply kick South Africa off AGOA. And the way I understand, and I'm not an expert about American politics or legislation, but the way, well, what has become quite clear is that this guy is extremely powerful. He can impose tariffs left, right, and center, and he can force economies into recessions because that's what's going to happen to Canada and what's going to happen to Mexico now by Donald Trump simply signing a piece of paper. If he can do that, he can certainly kick South Africa off AGOA. Maybe there could be some legal challenges that we can use to try to get back on AGOA, but it seems to me that he can actually kick South Africa off AGOA if he wants to. That's not all. He can even sanction South Africa. He can tell American investors that they're not allowed to buy our debt, as an example. And remember, the Americans and Europeans, they are major funders of the fiscal deficit in South Africa. The point I want to make is that Donald Trump can cause a lot of damage to the South African economy. Even if he kicks us off AGOA, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world, but it will shave off 0.2 or 0.3% of economic growth, for example. And everything adds up eventually. The economy this year, I don't think we're going to see 1.5% economic growth. And if you add some other things, like, for example, a weaker currency to that and higher interest rates to that, then economic growth is going to be even weaker. So yes, I'm afraid AGOA is certainly one of those ways of harming the South African economy, but there are many other ways through which the Trump administration can cause immense damage to the South African economy. And now, my apologies. And
mm.
now you have South African politicians threatening Donald Trump. My goodness, what are they smoking?
Can you tell us what AGOA is about a bit for those who don't know?
Okay,
Because it's African Growth and Opportunity Act.
it is a unilateral um, agreement between, well, it started, I think, by Bush, if I'm not mistaken, in the year
Yeah, by
2000,
the younger Bush.
the other Bush.
Yeah, in year
And what
2000,
basically
yeah.
what it is, it allows certain African countries to export without limitations certain products to the United States. And in the case, I think South Africa is the biggest beneficiary from the AGOA Act. We export a lot of motor vehicles, a lot of agricultural products to the United States quite easily, quite profitable to South Africa and to the benefit to the South African economy. The Americans do not have to do anything. We don't have to do anything in return. So we get it for free. This is a freebie. The Americans making it easier for us to export to the United States. It is good to our economy, and like I've said, certain industries benefit more than other industries. It is possible then for Donald Trump to say, listen, from now on, South Africa will be handled like any other country, and we have to pay certain import duties, and the benefit of AGOA then will not accrue to our economy anymore, and it will be detrimental to the South Africa. It will certainly be bad to the motor industry and certainly to the agricultural industry as well.
And by the way, it's not, there are other African countries under the AGOA um, program, so it's not only South Africa.
No,
Anyway,
there are many other countries, but as far as I understand it, South Africa is the country with the maybe gains the most from this.
yeah, this is Phumlani, the Phumlani Majosi show. I'm speaking to Dawie Roodt, who's a chief economist at Efficient Group. Remember to get yourself a copy of my book at a bookstore near you, Lessons from Past Heroes. It's a book about the importance of a market-driven economy, personal responsibility, law and order. Those are the things we need to get right in order to make South Africa a great country. Now, the trade war has begun, Dawie. President Trump has imposed a 25% tariff on Mexican goods entering the US, 25% um, tariffs on Canada goods entering the US, and 10% on Chinese goods entering the US. To think that he could do that even to a country like Canada, right? A country that shares the same culture, the same language, their accents, when I
Yeah.
listen to them, it's the same accent. So, I mean, they are so close. What does this mean for the global economy?
I must I, I
Yeah.
must tell you, I'm very, very much against any form of tariffs.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm
Why?
very
Yeah.
much in
Why
favor
is
of
that?
complete
Mm,
because everybody gains from free trade. I mean, this is an old going back to David Ricardo, a classical economist that proved it. Free trade is good for everybody. So free trade will be good for everybody. But Donald Trump is using this as a weapon. I must tell you, I certain things that Donald Trump say and do, I certainly do support. But on the tariffs one, I'm not so sure about that. The reason why he's imposing these tariffs, and by the way, some economists made some calculations. By imposing these tariffs on Mexico and on Canada, those two economies will be within 2 or 3 months. Those economies will go through quite a deep recession.
mm,
This is huge. It's not that big for America because the US economy is such a massively big economy that they can do without the rest of the world basically because they are so big. But it will have a huge impact on Canada and it will be a huge impact on Mexico. The reason why he did that, there are two reasons basically. The one is the illicit flow of drugs, and the other one is illegal immigrants coming from allegedly from Canada and from Mexico. I guess there could be some truth in it, much less so when you talk about Canada. There could be some truth in that, but I think Donald Trump is using this his economic muscle to force those countries to do something about their borders and do more about the illegal flow of certain drugs. Now, we can discuss that, we can talk about that as well, but the bottom line of that is likely it will lead to an increase in prices in the United States. Uh, in the meantime, the US dollar itself is appreciated. It's quite a strong dollar. And the impact on the US economy will, to an extent, will be neutralized by the stronger US dollar itself. And there are some other potential economic spin-offs and results because of this implementation of these tariffs as well. And we could talk about that as well. Like, for example, it could force the Canadian companies to become more productive. So in the end, it could actually backfire. So those are the kind of things that will happen. But I do believe that it will at least put some upward pressure on inflation, at least a little bit, at least in the short term. And that could lead to the Fed deciding to sit on their hands when it comes to interest rate reduction for quite some time. Or one can argue that all of a sudden the American companies will step into that vacuum. They will start producing a lot. They will get tax cuts as well. And it could actually in the end be to the benefit of the US economy. Although, like I've said, is that I am very much against tariffs. I believe in a free flow of trade. And Donald Trump obviously is using tariffs to achieve certain other political objectives.
Quick one, Davia. I just want to go back to the first part of our conversation. Sorry, I missed this. I need to bring this up with you. By the way, I'm also with you. I'm not a fan of tariffs at all. They are a bad idea. Here's what Elon Musk asked President Ramaphosa this morning when Ramaphosa was responding to Trump's comments. You know how presidents respond. Well, we're a constitutional country, blah, 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 right? And then Elon Musk asked this question: why do you have openly racist ownership laws, right? Now, this comes back to this debate about black economic empowerment. There are
Yeah, yeah.
people who say they are racist policies in South Africa. They discriminate against the white minority. What do you think of that? Could this be another form of pressuring South Africa to move away from race-based policy? Can anything be done there? I mean, does Trump have
Let
any?
me tell you,
Yeah,
there is a lot of pressure in companies in South Africa, and you give it various names: transformation, black economic
yeah,
empowerment, whatever. There are
redress.
all
Yeah,
sort of names of that.
yeah,
But the bottom line is that when you look at, now let's talk about race. If you look at race in South Africa, black people in South Africa are poor people, poorer than most of the other racial groups. And poor black South Africans did not get the benefit of this so-called black economic empowerment legislation that we've had recently. The guys that benefited from that are well-connected, rich black people and politicians. They are the guys that benefited from that. So I'm afraid, and I'm very much in favor of uplifting, especially the poor, all South Africans. But I'm afraid the way that so-called, and initially I was very much in favor of BEE, but I realized today that BEE has been hijacked by the relatively small number of black uh, opportunists and politicians, and they get the benefit from that, and not the majority of black people in South Africa. We have to put policies in place that do not see color. We must put policies in place that support the poor, all poor people in South Africa, and we must put policies in place to create wealth in South Africa. And we should not only create opportunities for a select few people with good connections, because that is unfortunately what it turned out to become.
And by the way, to add on that, we have seen, according to some people who have looked at the numbers, we have seen inequality amongst black people, Davi, increasing.
Exactly.
Right. Amongst
That's a
black
very
people.
important point.
Yeah.
A dramatic increase of
Yeah.
inequality, and not
Staggering.
that
Yeah.
I've got a problem. I don't have a problem with inequality.
Mm,
I don't really care about inequality. I want a lot of rich people. But what is important for me is the opportunity for poor people to become wealthy as well. And poor people do
mm,
not have the opportunity to become wealthy in South Africa. They don't have the skills. Don't have the infrastructure. They don't have a safe environment. They don't have a proper working bureaucracy. All those sort of things are working against poor people in South Africa. All of them.
yeah.
All of them. All the races.
Yes, all the races. Now, let's go back to Trump's tariffs. So Javier Milei, the current president of Argentina, I admire him
My
a lot.
hero.
Do you like him?
I love him.
So he was at the World Economic Forum in Davos 2 weeks ago, right? He was
Did
asked
you listen
about,
to his speech? Did you listen
sorry?
to his speech?
Yeah, yeah,
Did you
oh, yeah,
listen to his speech?
yeah, yes, yes. I
Oh.
love him when he speaks. So he says, Davi, he was asked about Trump's tariffs, right? His view is that um, Trump's tariffs, they are part of a global trade strategy, right? It's a
Yeah,
geopolitical strategy.
yeah.
He says that he
Very, very
doesn't
good.
really believe that Trump is a protectionist, right? He rather uses his trade policy to shape geopolitical dynamics, right, in favor of the
Yeah.
US. Would you agree with that? That Trump's
It,
tariffs are more of a geopolitical strategy from Trump?
it's a negotiation tool, I guess. And that's what many people are saying.
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
using
yeah,
this.
negotiation
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, he's using that. Yes, I guess so. See what happened to Colombia, for example. That was a bit of a spat last week. We sent a lot of illegal immigrants back to Colombia, and they sent it back, and then he just slapped a lot of tariffs on Colombia, and the next thing the president sent his own plane to come and pick up those illegal immigrants and bring them back to Colombia. That's an example. I mean, Donald Trump He's a businessman. He uses various strategies and tactics, I guess, to get what he wants. And I guess tariffs could be used to achieve certain things, and maybe tariffs in the end could lead to fewer tariffs for the world and more freer trade eventually if Trump gets some certain things that he demands. But again, using tariffs the way that he's using it in this very, very strong arm tactics of Donald Trump, I'm not so sure I always agree with that.
But are these tariffs going to cause a serious damage on the global economy? Are
Yeah,
we likely
it
to
is.
see the US
Yeah.
inflation rising? Because I saw Professor or Sir Neil Ferguson, the Hoover historian, the other day on YouTube. He was saying that, look, during Donald Trump's first term, he did implement some tariffs, and they were not a cause of inflation in the US, right? And then you have Peter Schiff, another economist, who has argued that the cause of US inflation has not been tariffs, right? It's been rather QE, right, and government spending under Joe
Yeah,
Biden.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
are these tariffs going to cause damage in the global economy?
In a global economy, it certainly is. It's disrupting global supply chains without a doubt. And again, it really depends on who you're talking about. Well, there's an argument. I can give you an argument that tariffs will lead to higher inflation, weaker economic growth, weaker global economic growth, higher interest rates. And I explain to you how we're going to get there. But I can also explain and can give you a narrative that it will actually lead to stronger economic growth globally and lower interest rates globally. For
How stronger?
example,
How stronger
yeah,
economic growth?
listen to this story, for example. So tariffs is not going to harm the US economy that much because it's such a huge economy. And he can use this extra income to cut on company taxes in the United States. And a stronger dollar will mitigate some of the effect of higher tariffs. And in the meantime, they will cut back on state expenditure quite dramatically. And apparently, Elon Musk is trying to do exactly that. And that will lead to a smaller deficit, and a smaller deficit and lower debt eventually in the US, relatively speaking, will lead to downward pressure on inflation. So there is certainly a potential, the chances that these tariffs could eventually lead to lower inflation and stronger economic growth, at least in the United States, and it may eventually spill over to some other economies in the world as well. But it seems to me as the mainstream idea at the moment is that these tariffs is likely to lead to some upward pressure on inflation, at least in the United States. And it's certainly going to disrupt global economic, well, supply chains and economic growth as well.
It's a very, very interesting year, and we have just begun it. We've just begun,
Yeah,
we've just started. It's February.
I can tell you
Now,
one thing. It's
yeah,
wonderful being an economist today because the world is changing so quickly.
things are changing so fast. But other nations will retaliate, right? Canada retaliating, Mexico as well, China, I heard they're going to retaliate. Do they have
Yeah,
are they going to be able to really make any significant retaliation
no,
at all?
no. If you look at the size of the US economy compared to Mexico and
It's too
Canada,
massive, yeah.
I mean, you can't compare it. I mean, the US economy is just so big,
And
and
besides
you've
that,
got,
Davi, it's not only big. They are able to produce many things. They have a huge, strong domestic market,
yeah,
agriculture, technology. They
exactly
seem
that.
to be, they are very good in energy now. Are they not producing their own energy right now?
They're
The
the
US?
biggest, yeah, they're the biggest oil producer in the world. They import a little bit of oil and gas from Canada. And by the way, there are no levies on that.
Yeah.
Well, the levies are not as big as on the other levies. It's only 10% levy on oil and gas from Canada. And in the meantime, Donald Trump made it very clear to many other oil producers in the world that he wants to see a lower oil price globally, which will benefit South Africa as well. But there are many other things, that Donald, I'm not so sure I agree with him. He threatened the BRICS countries if they should try to start using their own currencies to trade. I think that's wrong. I think the US dollar will remain the world's most important reserve currency, and the BRICS countries are not going to be able to change that. But if we want to trade in our own currencies, I don't think it. I think it's wrong of Donald Trump to blame us for trying to trade in our own currencies. It's just simply and it's just cheaper to trade in our own currencies. But I don't think Donald Trump should be worried that the BRICS countries will ever be able, well, soon anyway, be able to create their own reserve currency. That's just not going to happen. So threatening the BRICS countries because they want to use their own currencies for trade, I think that's wrong of Donald Trump.
Yeah, I think it amounts to bullying in my view. Here he does
Yeah,
bullying tactics. I'm also a
that
fan
is.
of many things he proposes, but in some aspects, in some areas, I think he's just being a bully, and I'm not sure
Yeah.
if that is going to help being a bully. Now he
The biggest,
says, yeah,
if I may, the biggest plus of Donald Trump, what I like most about him, is
mm,
that he wants to cut state expenditure. He wants to
yeah,
cut back, he wants to get back at what he calls the deep state. And that's what we need to do in South Africa. We really have to start with a zero budget. We must ask all these questions. Do we need this Department of Small Business Development? Do we need a department for women and children and blah, blah, blah? We don't need this sort of stuff. We can close down those departments or we can consolidate those. We can cut back on state expenditure dramatically in South Africa and improve efficiency. And that's something that I believe Donald Trump, if he's successful with that, that will be his real legacy. That will what the people will remember Donald Trump of, and that is the improvement in state efficiency. Exactly the same as what Javier Milei is trying to achieve in Argentina.
So, and he has appointed Elon Musk to be the leader
Yeah,
of this. Is it Dodge, the government of Department of Government Efficiency? Yeah,
yeah,
to try and cut down the government. And we can hope that that will become a
that
template
works.
for other
Yeah.
leaders in many countries around the world, especially developing countries, where you
Yes,
find out that there's just too much state that is
yes.
inefficient, fueling corruption. Um, and it's been damaging. It's been really damaging.
That comes back to our discussion in the beginning of this
Yeah.
discussion, where I said, and I believe you agree with me, is that the primary function of the state is to protect the people and their stuff. That's what the role of the state is. The state there's no reason for a state or a government to exist except if they do it for the protection of the people and their stuff in the country. And that's
Mm,
where the emphasis should be. And if you look at the quality of South Africa's state, of the quality of South African government, that's not what they do. It is unsafe to walk outside here. The state
very
itself that's
bad.
supposed to protect my stuff, they now want to steal my stuff. They've got legislation making it easier for politicians to steal my property. That is wrong because that means that the state is actually becoming illegitimate and the state shouldn't exist because the reason for their existence is to protect me and my stuff. And if they don't do that anymore, then we don't need them.
Yeah. Davi, we have 4 minutes. Let's talk now the geopolitics now of this, right? There are people who argue that, well, if the United States gets very tough on South Africa, it's going to make South Africa to shift more toward China, right? That's okay,
That's
fine.
an argument.
You can cut us off AGOA. You can abuse us, as abuse us as South Africans. Then we are driving us into the arms of China. We are going to be closer to China and make sure that we redirect our trade commitments to China and Russia, right? How do you see that? Do you have that? Do we have
That
that
is
luxury?
that is a very good point that you're making. And I've been thinking about that. I do not have an answer to that yet. But what I can say is that the private sector in South Africa, the financial markets in South Africa, the markets are so well regulated and so liquid, and the markets in South Africa are very important. The state gets its funding from the capital market mostly. We've got a sophisticated tax system in South Africa. The private sector is crucially important, and the private sector, I can tell you, is mostly in favor of good relations with the West and with America specifically. So I
Mm.
think there will be a lot of internal opposition to the government if they try to move closer to China, as an example. And although China is our most important trading partner, China is certainly not our most important funder. They're not the most important investors in South Africa. The Americans and Europeans are. So I think in the end, I think the financial markets will dictate whether South Africa will move closer to China or closer to the West.
Now, in Davos, the World Economic Forum, there was a lot of optimism around the Trump presidency, right? There was even much talk about, deregulation. Regulation is bad. I just saw the Economist has released a cover story about this. rebellion against regulation, which I think is good because, I mean, the idea
Good.
that, the fact that there's too much regulation, it needs to be put on the global,
Yeah.
forum, Dawie. And I'm happy to see
Yeah.
that talk is being brought back. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on
Yeah.
are you still
The-
optimistic on the world? Just in a minute, are optimistic
Well,
for the global
well,
economy?
I can tell you, Donald Trump is very rough on the edges.
Yeah.
But here and there, he's doing absolutely the right thing and trying to cut back on red tape. That is certainly one of them. But the guy that I really hope is going to make a success of what he's busy with at the moment is Xavier Milei,
Mm.
because he is actually the guy taking the lead here, the global lead. So far, he's been really successful. And I mean, I read everything I can about Argentina, and Xavier Milei, he's really the guy with the big scissors cutting all that red tape. And let's hope he's going to be successful, because he will be an example to the rest of the socialist leaders out there how things should be done. So
Mm.
Xavier Milei, without a doubt, is my hero, and let's hope he's going to be successful. He is going to be the template of future economic policy.
And he has inspired Trump as well. Dawie, thank you so
Yeah,
much, sir.
my pleasure. Wonderful talking to you.
Great to talk to you. We'll chat soon again. Have a nice one.